Morning guys, it's Tom Barclay here. It's the morning after a huge night before. Tottenham are through to the Europa League final. They saw off Bodo Glimt 2-0, 5-1 on aggregate, making it look, let's be honest, pretty comfortable, pretty easy in the end, out here in the Arctic Circle. And they have now set up a final on the 21st of May out in Bilbao with Manchester United. Yes, a second major European final in 6 years. They're going back to Spain, just like they went to Madrid, and they're facing English opposition, just like they did against Liverpool back in the Champions League final back in 2019. But fingers crossed, this time it's going to be different. They're going to end up having a glorious night rather than a disappointing one back then. I'll come on to United a little bit towards the end. Obviously, there'll be loads of talk about that in the build-up to it, but let's just reflect on the game a little bit. So, coming out here to, as I said, the Arctic Circle up in northern Norway, Bodo, there was a lot of pitfalls. There was a lot of sort of suggestions of a banana skin because Bodo had such an impressive record against a host of European big names this season, from Porto, Red Star Belgrade, Olympiacos, FC Twente, Lazio obviously in the last round. And given the brittle nature of Tottenham under Ange Postecoglou and just generally recently in recent years, despite winning that first leg 3-1, there were plenty of Spurs fans who were sort of worrying that they would get overturned here, particularly on Bodo's famously synthetic pitch. But it didn't work out that way at all. I mean, to be honest, it never really felt like it was in doubt. And it wasn't really based on a performance that was in any way that you'd describe as Ange ball. If anything, we haven't seen that really for a while, really. This was a much more akin to the performance out in Frankfurt, where they obviously had to go and win, let alone here they could have lost one by a goal and still gone through. But it was just like in Frankfurt, it was super low risk. To be honest, it was a masterclass in time wasting. Vicario throughout was telling everyone to slow it down. Every time they had a chance to fall to the floor, they took their time. Every time the ball went out of play, they took ages to get it going again. In the end, Vicario was booked, and it was really frustrating. The home fans, it was one of those. The stadium itself only holds about 8,700. It's a tiny ground. The Spurs allocation was 404, and it was quite an interesting stadium. Like I said before, it had sort of League Two vibes, but the crowd definitely had sort of Champions League kind of energy. I'd definitely say the Bodo fans were singing relentlessly throughout and booing the Spurs players relentlessly throughout, but it didn't really work. And to be honest, the temperatures were colder than it had been the previous day, and the wind did pick up, so you really did get to feel that. And when you're in a ground like that, unlike Spurs, where from a journalist point of view, you sort of end up going in at half time and you warm up. Basically, you're sort of outside for sort of 3 hours ahead of kickoff during half time. And then I really realised towards the end that I had been sitting outside in the Arctic Circle for quite a long time. Probably not the best idea, and I was pretty cold. But I guess for players, I don't think it would have been too chilly, and they seem to really handle the pressure. And everyone knows like how much pressure Postecoglou would have been under had his team frozen out here. But they didn't. They handled the occasion really, really well. Like I said, managing to sort of slow things down, but really limiting Bodo to a few chances, not many chances at all throughout the game. They were, again, it was quite low risk. They didn't really. There were moments, if Spurs had needed to win the game, which obviously they went on to do anyway, where you felt like they could have committed more going forward and probably been in with more chances, because Bodo were trying to sort of play their way through, and they were, particularly on the left-hand side with Richarlison and Doggy, you felt like if they'd really gone for it, they would have broken free, particularly ironically past the fullback for Bodo, who was so critical of Tottenham's press in the first game. It was notable this match that Spurs were pressing harder than they were in the first game. I mean, that comment seemed to be so silly from their fullback, where he described it as a raver, which politely translates to bad, but literally translates more to ass, apparently. That was a silly comment because it was an obvious tactic from Spurs. That's what they meant to do. In the same way that here they did press a bit more. And yeah, Spurs sort of took the chances. They had a free kick towards the end of the first half. It was Porro took it, obviously with Maddison not being there. Might have taken it anyway because it's a very good free kick taker, and it was only a really good save that stopped that from going in. And then in the second half, just after the hour, In comes a corner from Matisse Tell, who just come on for Charlison. Romero, who's such a dominant presence in the air, gets above his man, heads it down, and there's Solanke, sort of Johnny on the spot to finish it off. And while Solanke's numbers this season, in what's still been an injury hit season from his point of view, aren't outstanding, and probably not as much as many as you'd want from a striker who's cost 65 million and plays for England. I mean, that really doesn't do him justice for how he brings in other players into the game and his all-round game. And as you know, if you've watched this for a while, I'm a huge fan of his. But it would be good if he could sort of up the goals tally. But the fact of the matter is, in the last 2 away European games, where really the pressure's really been on, he stepped up and scored in both of them. Yes, it was a penalty at Frankfurt, but that was a real pressure penalty, and he stuck it away really nicely. That goal really killed them off, Bodo. Any kind of opportunity that they were going to come back into the game, into the tie, was over then. And it certainly was even more so when about 6 minutes later, Porro's trying to find Solanke with a cross, and it just seems to just loop in and hit the post at the far stick and go in. And for all the bad luck that Spurs seem to have encountered this season, whether it be injuries or just whatever's gone on, that moment sort of felt like something that perhaps they were owed after all the bad luck this season. And the scenes at the end were just fantastic, really. Obviously, a small contingent of Spurs fans had come over. Players all ran over, and they were all involved with the fans, really enjoying that moment, because it's not very often, as poor as the league season's been this year, it's very rare that teams get to European finals. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, Spurs, in a way, having 2 in 6 years is pretty rare. And this is just an absolutely massive opportunity. I mean, on to Postecoglou's sort of comments afterwards. I mean, I don't know if it's the pressure he's been under, the sort of speculation about his position, or just his general nature, where he can be like this, particularly after a win. But I was actually in the mix zone, speaking to Solanke and Van der Ven, but I sort of came in halfway through, and it's hard to know when to ask a question at that point, because you don't know what's already been asked, how long is left. But I did catch the sort of tail end of his kind of rant to a certain extent about Man United, and watching it back, the suggestion that United have said that even if they won the Europa League, or Amarin has said that it wouldn't save their season. Would this be the case for you at Spurs? And he really sort of pushed back on it. I guess he just didn't really want to hear about the bad league season on this evening, when he's finally got, he's made a massive step to get into the Europa League final. For once didn't really want to hear about that. And he really pushed back on that. He said, irrelevant what Man United say or what they do. And I don't want to, I couldn't care less about the league record right now, effectively. It's about how massive it would be to go all the way with Tottenham. And you sort of really sense a sort of spiky nature from him in that press conference on that front. Maybe fair enough. I wonder if the sort of talk around his future for so long has that was like an outpouring of frustration and relief, I suppose, having got through the tie, because it does really still feel like, I'll be honest, I'm still getting the sense that even if he goes all the way, that his job is very much in jeopardy. I know it's been written. I've said, consistently that the mood can change if they go and win a trophy, but I don't know if that is still the sense. I don't think it's like a foregone conclusion that he definitely would stay if he won a trophy, which seems kind of mad, to be honest, given how the lack of success that Spurs have had over the years. But look, let's see if that plays out. First of all, they got to go to the final and win it, and then we'll see the reaction after that. But either way, Ange being a little bit spiky after that. There was a nice quote right at the end when he answered a question from my colleague George Sessions, who asked him about his dad. Obviously, his dad passed away a while ago, but had a massive influence on Ange and his love of football and the love of playing football in a certain way. And he was asked what his dad would have thought about him managing a European final. And actually, just before that, was in a pains to tell people how he'd only been managing in Europe for 4 years, and he'd already reached a final as opposed to other people, which felt like a little bit of a dig at, you can pick your managers who would fit that criteria, who've been managing for longer and not made a European final. But anyway, about his dad, he talked about how, rather specifically speaking about his dad, he talked about how he's got friends who will be getting tickets to Bilbao, and how he will feel even a sense of imposter syndrome when being in the dugout in Bilbao, because he'll have a feeling like he should be up there with his mates in the stands, which sort of underlines this amazing journey he's been on as a coach to get where he has. And that was sort of classic Ange, sort of giving a really nice quote about, which was quite honest and humble about his awareness of where he is now in his life, and the sort of almost pinch me moment. But don't get it wrong, I'm sure he feels like he sort of deserves it from what he's achieved and the team's achieved. And there's also, I really urge people to go and watch this, because it's really revealing about the way he speaks to the players. Spurs did a really lovely little clip, a really interesting clip of Postecoglou speaking in the dressing room to the players afterwards, which for a couple of minutes clip about what it meant to get through this game and what it would mean to go all the way at Man United. And I think the final line, I'm not quite sure, because the players sort of start shouting, but it sounds like tonight, in the weeks to come we'll focus, but tonight we drink, was what it sounded like. But it was quite a fun line, and again it gave you an idea of how the authority he has in front of the players, how he talks to them, if that is reflective of what he's like most of the time, how they respond to him. Was quite interesting, because you'll obviously watch all the press conferences with him and see how he speaks to us and the media, and how he handles himself, and whether he can be spiky, like I said, or whether he can be funny, whatever it can be. But that, I thought, was quite a window into how he must be in the dressing room. So that was pretty cool, so I checked that out. Anyway, let's wrap it up by briefly talking about Man United. Obviously there'll be loads to talk about later, but there really is no reason to fear United, because Ange has never lost to them. He's played them 5 times. He played them twice last season, 3 times this season, including the League Cup game against them. He beat them all 3 times this season. He beat them once last year and drew to them. He's got a fantastic record. Obviously, it's a different game. Obviously, it's Man United, and there's a sort of weight that comes with them. And with Amorim, you just don't know what's going on. He keeps sort of playing them down, but then he goes and wins at Bilbao, and you get the sense that maybe they are building something. Maybe the team is starting to come together. It sounds like Mason Mount, who's been a forgotten man for so long, played well last night, and maybe could fit really well in this 3-4-2-1 system. They've got good players. They don't have great players, but they've got good players. They definitely can cause Spurs problems. But Spurs have, only need to look at their recent record against them to sort of see a blueprint of how to beat them, and that the fact that United are brittle and lose games relentlessly, a bit like Tottenham, I suppose, in the league this season. So they really should give them heart going into it. But it will be a different game, and they'll have to really think about it. But they've got a great opportunity on that front. And if they go, they're only 90 minutes or possibly 120 in penalties if it really goes the distance from a first trophy in 17 years, which is just huge for the club. And of course, it would end up meaning that Ange would end up with a trophy in his second season, like he said back in September. He pretty much always does, which is something that's kind of been a bit of a bold claim that's kind of stuck with him the whole time. I've written about it relentlessly, so has everybody else. Everyone's talking about it. But look, the guy called it back then. He had the courage of his convictions to go with it. He might actually end up delivering it, which would be an amazing story for him to go all the way. He's now so close to it. There's a fantastic opportunity to go and do it against a, let's be honest, brittle United side. I don't think they could have really asked for more at this stage. They've been written off a lot this season. People thought they would come unstuck against Frankfurt. People thought they'd come unstuck up here in the Arctic Circle. They didn't. They were good. They adapted. They played differently. They found a way. And I think they can do it against United, but it's not going to be easy. Anyway, I'm going to head back now to England. Cheers, guys.